The Serengeti plains appear under a burning sunrise like a golden bowl of fire. Wind whistles through the dry grass, carrying the scent of dust and a haunting silence. For Mark, a photographer who spent 10 years of his youth in Africa, this place is not just wild nature, but a sanctuary. He is in the final days of his project titled The Last Kingdom, an effort to record the final breaths of the greatest icons. Shaka is not just a lion in the eyes of Mark. He is an aged king with a legendary black mane, a creature that ruled with strength and pride. During 3 long weeks of tracking, Mark longed for a single moment. Shaka roaring in the early sunlight, a roar that could shake the entire savannah and awaken the conscience of the world. That morning, Mark broke all safety rules. He left the security vehicle and walked alone through the wilderness to reach the ancient acacia tree, where Shaka often chose his throne to catch the sun. Mark held his breath, his 400mm lens ready in his hands, his finger resting lightly on the button like a prayer. But that majestic roar never sounded. Instead, a dry metallic noise tore through the air. Thud, scrape, thud. The sound of a shovel hitting the hard, dry earth sounded as cold as a hammer hitting a coffin. Mark realized with horror that he did not come to witness a rain, but to attend a secret funeral. Mark hid behind the rough acacia trunk, his heart beating so fast he felt it might burst out of his chest. He tremblingly raised the lens, adjusting the focus to pierce through the thorny leaves. Through the clear glass, his world completely collapsed. Shaka, the king he always worshipped, was lying there. No longer heroic, no longer possessing steps that shook the ground. Now, he was just a motionless, pitiful corpse. The powerful black mane that was once the pride of the entire Serengeti was now matted with blood and red sand, looking like a discarded old rug. Mark choked back a sob in his throat as he began to identify the people at the scene. Beside the carcass were 2 thin local men whom Mark recognized immediately. It was Kojo and his younger brother, the devoted guides who once shared every piece of bread with Mark during forest trips. They were silently digging a deep hole right next to Shaka, their eyes empty and soulless, like ghosts performing a sinful ritual. Each shovel, thrust into the ground, was a knife wound to the heart of Mark. But what made Mark shiver most were the 3 men standing around them. They did not wear the ragged clothes of poachers. They wore neat uniforms, the kind belonging to the Reserve Ranger Force, the people who swore under the flag to protect every inch of land and every life here. On their shoulders were black Alaska rifles, the barrels pointed at the villagers like a cruel threat. In that moment, a devastating truth appeared clearly in the mind of Mark. This was not a spontaneous poaching act by poor people. This was an organized murder, a link in a dark contract worth millions of dollars from international wildlife organ trafficking syndicates. Shaka did not die from the struggle for survival between animals. He died from a cowardly shot by the very people the world trusted to protect him. Mark saw a soldier take out a small silver suitcase, open it, and check something inside with a sinister smile. That was the reward for processing the old king. Mark bitterly realized the ironic contrast between the majestic beauty of the African savanna and the corruption happening under the shadow of this acacia tree. Those soldiers were selling the soul of the plains for bloody dollar bills, while forcing miserable villagers to become accomplices, forced to bury the god they once revered to erase all evidence. The look through the lens of Mark now was not that of an artist seeking beauty. It was the look of a witness seeing the collapse of human morality. He realized that if he just stood still and let them fill that hole, Shaka would disappear from history as a nameless missing person, and darkness would continue to cover the Serengeti. Mark held his breath, his chest tightening as if someone was squeezing it. In the eerie silence of dawn, even the smallest sound could become a death sentence. He knew the laws of this land well. In the wild savanna, when the guns belong to the wicked, human life is sometimes cheaper than a horn or an animal skin. Just one wrong step, one snapping dry branch, and Mark would no longer be the storyteller, but the next one lying in that deep pit with Shaka. Standing behind the ancient acacia tree, Mark looked down at the camera in his hand. This was the most modern equipment, capable of catching the smallest vibrations of light. But right now, it was as heavy as a block of lead. He stood before a cruel boundary. If he retreated in silence, he would live. He could return to his family, continue his illustrious photography career, and forget this horrific scene like a nightmare. But if he pressed the shutter, the mechanical sound, even if minimized to the limit, could still echo across the open space, betraying his position instantly. Mark looked back at Shaka through the lens. The king of the plains lay there, insulted by indifferent shovels and the triumphant smiles of traitors. A simmering anger began to rise within him, burning away his initial fear. He remembered 10 years of attachment to this land, the long nights staying awake just to protect a bird nest or track a herd of elephants. He could not let Shaka, the symbol of pride and freedom, be discarded like a faulty item, erased from this world without anyone knowing. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? That question swirled deep in the mind of Mark. He realized that the mission of a photographer is not only to record beauty, but also to expose the most brutal truths, even when that truth might take their life. Mark began to act with high concentration. The hands that usually shook with age suddenly became incredibly steady. He gently adjusted the settings, increasing the ISO to compensate for the low light, widening the aperture to focus on the face of the commander holding the silver suitcase, living proof of corruption. He held his breath, his heart skipping a beat to keep his body completely still. Click! That tiny sound felt like a thunderous explosion to Mark. He saw through the lens that the nearest commander suddenly froze. He was no longer laughing. The ears of a man who had experienced hundreds of hunts had caught a strange frequency that did not belong to nature. He spun around, his sharp gaze scanning the bushes where Mark was hiding. Who is there?
Here now.
He roared,
I know
his
you're
voice
in there.
hoarse
Come out, or I'll
and
burn
full
this whole
of
place
murderous
down.
intent. Immediately, the black, cold AK rifle barrel pointed straight at the ancient acacia tree. Mark felt the cold breath of death approaching, but in his hand, the camera had captured the most precious evidence. He was no longer afraid. Instead, there was a strange serenity. The truth had been recorded. Mark knew there was no way back. When the AK rifle was locked on his position, any hiding would only make it easier for the enemy to pull the trigger. He took a deep breath, calmly stepped out from behind the old acacia tree, both hands raised high above his head. In his right hand, he still gripped the camera, the only physical evidence of the crime that just occurred. The grave diggers stopped their work. Kojo looked at him with eyes of horror, a silent plea clear on the wrinkled face of the old guide. What did you see? The commander approached, his voice hissing through his teeth like a cobra. He did not wait for Mark to answer, grabbed the camera from his neck, and threw it hard against a nearby rock. A sharp cracking sound rang out. The camera, worth tens of thousands of dollars, the companion of Mark across many Savanna miles, was now shattered into pieces of plastic and glass. He sneered, using his boot to crush the lens. Do you think a photo can save this animal? Here, the sand will swallow everything, including you. Mark looked at the wreckage of the camera, then looked directly into the eyes of the commander. He did not flinch, his voice hardening. A photo might not save Shaka, but it will ensure you never sleep peacefully under this sun again. The commander signaled his subordinates to tie Mark up. In that moment of chaos and tension, a miracle happened that the gunman did not notice. Mark, with the experience of someone living on the edge of danger, had secretly pressed the memory card release button just before the camera was snatched away. He skillfully let the tiny card fall into the red sand right under his feet. At that moment, Kojo, the former guide of Mark, stepped forward to continue digging the hole as ordered by the soldiers. He had seen the entire action of Mark. When the soldier turned his back to get more rope, Kojo did a brave thing. Instead of shoveling dirt into the pit, he used a shovel to secretly push a thick layer of soil, completely burying the tiny memory card right where the foot of Mark had stood. A fleeting look between Mark and Kojo established a wordless contract. The truth would be protected by the oppressed. The following months were a series of nightmares for Mark in the rebel camp. but faith in the memory card under the Serengeti sand helped him survive. 6 months later, thanks to pressure from international organizations and a rescue by a special task force, Mark returned to that place. He found Kojo, and under the ancient acacia tree, they dug up the most powerful weapon in the world. A shocking international trial took place. The photo titled Silent Evidence appeared on the large screen of the court, exposing the faces of the traitors and the pitiful body of Shaka. It was not just a photo, it was an undeniable indictment by light. The corrupt soldiers were handcuffed one by one under the witness of the whole world. Justice was finally served, not by bullets, but by the courage of a man with a camera and the remaining honesty of a villager. The afternoon sunlight of the Serengeti once again dyed the vast plains red, but this time it did not carry the shade of death. 6 months since that fateful day, Mark stood again under the ancient acacia tree. He no longer wore the multi-pocketed vest of a photographer, nor did he carry a bulky lens kit worth a fortune. Instead, he wore the grass-colored uniform of the Volunteer Ranger Force. On his shoulder was a rifle, not for hunting, but to ensure that no illegal gunshot would ever be allowed to ring out on this land again. Mark slowly approached an unmarked grave, just a small mound of stones surrounded by dry thorn branches to keep scavengers away. That was where Shaka rested. He placed his hand on the hot stone under the sun, feeling the warmth of the savanna spread into his palm. A trial had ended. The culprits were behind bars. But for Mark, the true victory did not lie in the sentences. It lay in the awakening of his own soul. I spent my whole life photographing beauty, but I never truly protected it, Mark thought to himself. He realized a harsh but true thing. To protect life, sometimes one must step out of the position of a safe observer to become a warrior on the front line. A camera can tell the story, but the presence of a protector is what prevents the next tragedy from happening. Beside him, Kojo, the guide from years ago, had also become part of the community patrol team. Kojo smiled, a gentle smile replacing his former fear. The sacrifice of Mark and the brave action of Kojo had created a powerful wave of change. Now, villagers were no longer forced to be silent before evil. They had become the eyes and ears of the savannah, because they understood that when nature dies, their souls and source of life wither too. Under the small stone marker, Mark personally carved a line in Swahili and English. The truth may be buried under black sand, but the light from it will burn the evildoers. That was not just a tribute to Shaka, but a reminder to anyone intending to violate this green sanctuary. As the sun slowly hid behind the distant hills, from the tall grass, a small figure appeared. It was a lion cub, perhaps a descendant of Shaka, looking at the world with clear golden eyes. It gave a small, immature roar and then ran into the darkness of the wilderness. Mark smiled, a peaceful smile he had never had in 10 years of holding camera. The story of Shaka and Silent Evidence has become a new legend of the Serengeti, reminding us that faith and the connection between people, when placed in the right spot, can heal even the deepest wounds of nature. We do not need to be great heroes to change the world. We just need to be brave enough not to stay silent before evil. The journey to protect the core values of nature is still very long, and each of your companionships is the greatest motivation. If the story of Mark and Shaka touched your heart, do not forget to press the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Each of your subscriptions not only helps the channel grow, but is also a commitment that we will listen, spread, and protect the truths that need to be voiced. See you in the next films.